afternoon. Come on, guys. I know y'all are here with me. I know it's a small group. Thank you very much. All right. Some years ago, the St. Paul School of Theology in Kansas City was seeking a new president. Over 100 candidates applied for the position. The search committee narrowed the list to 5 eminently qualified persons. Then somebody came up with a brilliant idea. Let's send a person to the institutions where each of the finalists are currently employed, and let's interview the janitors at each place, asking him what he thinks of the man seeking to be our president. This was done, and a janitor gave such a glowing appraisal of William McIlvaney that he was selected president of St. Paul's School of Theology. Now, somebody on that search committee understood. It is a flash of genius that those who live close to Christ become so secure in his love that they no longer relate to other people according to rank or power or money or prestige. They treat janitors and governors with equal dignity. They regard everybody as VIP. Children seem to do this intuitively. Christians have to relearn it. Here we go. In verse 32, we read a not so complimentary report on the disciples, but they did not understand. That's a picture that can be hung in the halls of the Museum of Mankind. When confronted by true greatness, we simply do not see it. Here's what happened with the disciples. One day, Jesus is passing through Galilee. We are told that he did not want anyone in the area to know where they were. Why is that? Because he had something important to tell the 12. It was a strategic part of his plan. The Son of Man, he explains, is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him. Now listen to what he says next. And after 3 days, he will rise. There it was. The whole plan lay before them. The crucifixion and the resurrection. They should have, been curious. They should have asked questions. They could have seen the significance. But the best they could muster up at this crucial moment was a blank stare and confused silence. They could not understand it because it did not meet what they felt met the measure of greatness. How do we grow to the point that we stop measuring people by their successes and start regarding people for their service, for their sacrifices? How do we move from a world model which measures value in terms of wealth, fame, and power to a model which measures value based on Jesus' teachings? What is greatness in the kingdom of God? First, let's notice that true greatness is hardly ever recognized. How can we know greatness when we see it? J.C. Penney had a way of recognizing it. He said, "Give me a stock clerk with a goal, and I'll give you a man who will make history. Give me a man with no goals, and I'll give you a stock clerk." We all understand Penney's point. A dream, though hidden, is in the most common of men, can bring about greatness. But a common man with no dream is just that, a common man. There are many ways to measure greatness. Some might say that that's what makes for greatness is intellect, and they would hold up the example of Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein developed his theory of relativity when he was 26 years old, and therefore, some say, by any measure, he is great. Now, others would say that what makes greatness is courage, and therefore Clara Barton should be held up as the standard. During the Civil War, Clara Barton earned the honor of Angel of the Battlefield. Her work with wounded ultimately led her to found the worldwide organization known as the Red Cross. Therefore, some would argue she is great. Still others would say that what makes for greatness is spirit. They would point to Jackie Robinson. The story of Jackie Robinson, the first professional black baseball player, is a story of triumph and perseverance over adversity. If you've heard his story, you know the insults that were hurled at him. His story is the triumph of the human spirit. Perhaps some would say that one's contribution to humanity is what makes for greatness. If that were the case, then few would argue against calling Jonas Salk great. It is difficult for us to imagine today the terror that the word polio struck in the hearts of parents. I will remember when I was a child and the vaccine was used on a mass scale. Now, of course, in those days, it was not a sugar cube, but an arm pricking. But few can deny that Jonas Salk gave us a great deal. But perhaps it is one who works for the peace of councils of the nations, of those who fight for justice, as did Martin Luther King or Harvey Milk. We all have deep within us a desire to be great. We have a desire to be the best at what we do, to excel. No one wants to be no one. But what is it, that measure of greatness that will get us there? And how can we recognize it when we see it? Let's leave this question for a few moments and look at the second point. Greatness is never about self-promotion. One day Jesus is walking with his disciples, and as they walk and talk among themselves, at the time they did not realize that he overheard them, but he clearly did, for when they later arrive at their destination, he questions them about it. The topic was who was the greatest among them. Exactly what they said, we don't know, but I imagine that the conversation went something like this. Simon Peter said, "Well, I am his right-hand man. I am a part of the inner circle. I am the spokesman of the group. Therefore, I am the greatest." Whereupon Andrew might have spoken up and said, "Well, dear big brother, let me remind you of something which you have conveniently forgotten. I was called into discipleship first. Indeed, I was the first one who invited you to come to Jesus. I got you here. Therefore, I am the greatest." The brothers James and John at this point speak up. "You both miss the point. Greatness is measured by the amount that you have sacrificed. We stood to inherit our father Zebedee's lucrative fishing business. We gave all that up." At this point, Matthew chimes in. "Well, if you want to talk about giving up money, I can play that game. I was a tax collector. None of you had as much money as I did. Therefore, I am the greatest." When the 12 arrived at their destination, Jesus asked them what they had been talking about back on the road. It was a question meant for their introspection. Jesus knew what they had been talking about, and with that question, the disciples are strangely quiet. They are embarrassed. It was at this point that Jesus told them, and vicariously us, what it is that makes for true greatness in the eyes of God. "If you would be great," he said, "be a servant." Someone once asked Dr. Albert Schweitzer, "Who is the greatest person in the world?" And he answered, "Some unknown person who is doing the work of love." When Mike Peters won the Pulitzer Prize for political cartoons in 1981, he wasn't expecting the honor. He described his response by saying, "It is like you are asleep and it's 2 a.m. and you are hugging your pillow and you're in funny pajamas and somebody bursts through the door and they come over and start shaking you and they say, 'Wake up, wake up.' And you say, 'What is it?' And they say, 'You have just won the Boston Marathon.' And you say, 'But I'm not running in the Boston Marathon.' And they say, 'Doesn't make any difference, you won.'" Jesus taught that heaven will hold some surprises. Honor and glory will be granted for behavior that was so natural, so undistinguished, and so non-competitive. Take the simple illustration that Jesus gives of receiving a child from somewhere. Jesus finds a small child who stands in front of him. It's interesting that Mark tells us that Jesus stands the child in front of him because then he takes the child up in his arms. Perhaps he was showing how the child was smaller than him in comparison. But he raises the child into his arms and says, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." Now, what does he mean? He's talking about having a humble servant attitude, being willing to reach out and help the lowliest of people so that we might show them the love of Christ. Such simple acts will be greatly rewarded. Yes, many of God's children are surprised to find that their faithful, simple service has brought them top honors. The servant will be honored. The last shall be first. And if there is one thing in this world that short circuits some simple acts, it is self-promotion. You cannot both serve and conquer. This leads us into our third point. Greatness is found in service to all. After a presidential debate, a reporter for a news magazine asked a young woman, "What do you think of the candidates?" She didn't say a word about her positions on the issue, on their positions of the issue of the skill at debate. She simply remarked, "None of them seem to have any humility." Benjamin Franklin, the early American statesman, made a list of character qualities that he wanted to develop in his own life. What he mastered one virtue. Once he mastered one virtue, he went on to the next. He did pretty well, he said, until he got to humility. Every time he thought he was making significant progress, he would be so pleased with himself that he became proud. Humility is an elusive virtue. Even Jesus' disciples struggled with it. Immediately after moments alone with his disciples, that they discuss who among themselves was greatest. Perhaps they took Jesus' talk about dying to be the language of war and not a prediction of death. Either way, they missed the measure of greatness. Jesus was about to serve in the most radical of ways by sacrificing himself on the cross. In doing so, he was sacrificing himself for their sins and the sins of the world. the disciples are not listening, and they miss the crucial point. In addition to this, be the acts which creates Christianity and shapes world history. There is a lesson, a virtue, a model offered for his listeners. You will recognize greatness when you look for it in the humble acts of love shown every day by people who are not interested in self-promotion. And when we fail to recognize this as a measure for greatness, we will find ourselves in last place. What happened to Richard Petty is a stark reminder. Many years ago, back in 1979, as 100,000 fans watched, Richard Petty ended his 45-race losing streak and picked up stock car racing's biggest purse, $73,900. It all happened at the Daytona 500. Petty's win, however, was a complete surprise. Going into the last lap, he was running third, 30 seconds behind the two leaders, running third. All at once, the car in second place tried to pass the number one man on the final stretch. This caused the first car to drift inside and force the challenger onto the infield grass and slightly out of control. What happened next was incredible. The offended driver pulled his car back onto the track, caught up with the leader, and forced him into the outside wall. Both vehicles came to a screeching halt. The two drivers jumped out and quickly got into an old-fashioned slugging match. In the meantime, third place Petty cruised by for the win. And Jesus said, "The first shall be last." Amen to that. Whew. Amen. All right, now be seated for the announcements. Best part of the whole service right here, guys. Weekly announcements. Weekly announcements. Okay. So first, I know we're going to talk about pray at dallasulc.com. Pray at dallasulc.com. That's our email address. If you have any prayer requests, you can email us there. You can choose to remain anonymous, or you can choose to leave your name. We pray every day here at Dallas Universal Life Church. If you'd also like us to add you to the bulletin, add your prayer request to the bulletin, we'd be glad to do that. Just let us know. Again, you can remain anonymous, or you can put your name in there, and we'll have the congregation pray for you on Sundays. Okay. Okay. And my request for volunteers again. I'd like to thank Baylor, who stepped in today to help us with the teleprompter and with our PowerPoint and our music. You did a great job. Thank you, Baylor. We appreciate you. It's been a great pleasure working with you. We need volunteers, guys. Anything you can do can help. I mean, we an hour a day, an hour a week, an hour a month. I mean, we'll take anything right now. We could always use your help, and no matter what it is your skills are, we'll train you. If you have an interest in some things that we have here to offer. I mean, we've got some great AV and audio and visual stuff and some camera work and some fun stuff to really learn and some layout work for the bulletin and whatnot. Everything you want to learn right here at Dallas Universal Life Church. Volunteer opportunities. All right, moving on. I tried. Hey, did y'all know we had a podcast? Did y'all know that? Y'all are just like dead tonight, aren't you? Hey, hello. Did y'all know we had a podcast? Well, yeah, let me tell you about this podcast. This podcast is pretty cool, guys. No, listen, it's really kind of neat. But we have this podcast, and if you haven't listened to the podcast yet, listen to it. I know we've got the YouTube site, and you've been here at the service or whatnot. It's totally different. To just listen to the podcast. It's just, I don't know what it is, but you get so much. It's just a different experience. Now, where can you hear that podcast? I'll tell you where you can hear it. Anchor, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Castbox, Breaker, Google Podcast, and of course, beautiful Spotify. Spotify, that's right. What do you think of that picture? Yeah, not bad. Hey, yippee. Guys, I'm sorry about having to do this again early, crack of dawn in the morning at 11 a.m. To do the service, tell you. But this was the last one for a while, hopefully. So next week, we return to 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock in the afternoon is our normal service, and we'll do that again next week, 3 o'clock. Okay? Yippee. Okay, this one. Do you have any comments? Do you have any suggestions? How about complaints? I hate those. That's what all these people do. I can't tell if they're commenting, if they're suggesting, or if they're complaining. They're doing something. I think it's just a riot. Maybe they're just praising the Lord and singing. That'd be nice too. Feedback at dallasulc.com. Feedback at dallasulc.com. This is perfect for our podcast, people who are listening to our podcast out there, and those who are watching us on YouTube as well. Anybody can use it. Please feel free. But I don't get to see you guys that are just watching out there in Cyberland. So I want to know that you feel that this is your church, because it is. I mean, if you're here joining us on a podcast or on YouTube or just whatever, this is your church as much as it is anybody else's here. And I want you to be a part of the decision making here. So tell us what you like, what you don't like, what you want to keep, what you want to get rid of. Use that feedback at DallasULC.com. Okay, does that do it for us? I think it does too. All right, guys, you ready to bring this home? Close it off. Take a little break and then do our roundtable. Okay? Hopefully you'll be a little more awake for that. This crack of dawn 11 a.m. thing is killing me.
Yeah, me too.
So,
that's where I try to make it.
Well, next week it's 3 o'clock.
That's why for the night ministry.
Amen. Amen. That's what we normally do here, but unfortunately people have regular lives and I have to keep regular appointments at times. So.
And the people online don't know what time it is anyway, so what's the difference?
We're not doing this for people online, we're doing this for people here. I mean, we are doing it for people online, but we're doing it for here, first. All right. So, what'd you like? What'd you not like? What do you want to keep? What do you want to get rid of? Y'all aren't here, but we welcome you now. Thank you for joining us. Matthew's going to wake up and join us. He's gotten a little warmer now. He's had his cider. Baylor's here, and of course we've got Marcus. I'm telling you, no, you did a great job. I mean, for the first time, you did very, very well. I had people that were with me much, much longer and didn't do as well as you did today, so we did just fine. Today we talked about the measure of greatness. What makes somebody great? I think I'm going to be doing a lot of the talking here today because I don't think anybody else is going to join me, are you? So it's going to be a round table of me talking.
I'm here.
Baylor, help me out here. Did you get anything from our gospel and our sermon today?
Greatness. Well, what makes a person great? What makes something great? The conditions. That was what you first asked.
Absolutely. That's right.
How do we define greatness? Is it simply above average? Is it being prepared for when that opportunity arises?
Okay.
What is great?
Well, I think just to throw my words in here with you, just to say a little bit about where you're going with that. Not even necessarily being prepared, but what are we being prepared for? What are we looking for? What are we? What are the traits of being great? Not just the traits here on earth, but the more importantly the traits that God would consider to be great. What God considers greatness, right? So what did we say about that? We said, hey, you'll recognize greatness when you look for it in the humble acts of love shown every day by people who are not interested in self-promotion. The humble acts of love shown every day by people who are not interested. In other words, they're not out to get a pat on the back or pat themselves on the back or get an award or get some sort of, praise, because they know that their praise is coming in the future, right?
As humans, we are by nature self-centered.
Absolutely.
Anytime one can, depending on what is called for, deny oneself and go the extra mile and help that person. Anytime you can, it is a great thing for me to be able to deny myself.
Well,
Anyone.
it is.
And I mean that in, simply thinking about someone more than yourself.
Well,
Helping that be.
Go ahead.
again, because our tendency is self-preservation and promotion.
And that's something we talk about every day. I mean, almost every time I'm up here talking, we talk about our saying. And our saying in Latin, atque ali, men and women for others. I mean, we have it right there on our logo. And that's how important this lesson is to our church. Who's that? Somebody look up the camera, please.
Upstairs.
Okay, very good. Make sure we have another guest coming in late. We want to make sure we got them in here. The first will be last, and the last will be first. So, the richest man on earth may or may not be the richest man in heaven. I think it all depends on, is it possible to be the richest man on earth and be the richest man in heaven? Anybody have a thought on that?
It's like the woman with the widow's mite.
Widow's mite.
She had like, say that she had 2 pennies.
Okay.
And Bill Gates gave $1,000. Which is greater? That 2 pennies is all she had. She gave all she had.
Well,
She's not even that night.
Right. So
Which gift is greater?
I don't know which gift is greater.
In
What do you think? What do you think? Which gift is greater? The woman who gave her last 2 cents, or Bill Gates who gave $1,000?
Well, obviously, the one who gave everything that they had.
Why?
Because they everything they had.
Because of the sacrifice, right? Because of giving up something that you have for yourself and giving it to somebody else.
Bill Gates probably did it just for like,
Well, who cares why he did it? His heart may be pure, but the point is that he.
Wouldn't he have done the same thing if he was one of that? No.
Actually,
He
he
did
paid
that.
somebody to do it for him because it's a full-time job to give away his money.
Yeah, and make sure it stays the proper tax racket, right?
Yeah.
Give away, but not too fast.
How about this though? There was something I said in the sermon that kind of rang with me a little bit. No one wants to be no one, but we're talking about this, this men and women for others, and not getting recognition, and not being proud of, being proud. You're not being pride in this sense. I think is different. We use those words a little differently today. Being proud is in the Bible, and when they talk about that, is of being over boisterous about our own aspirations that we claim to have, whether we have them or not. In other words, a little bit arrogant, right? A little bit overzealous about our own wonderfulness. I love that word, wonderfulness.
Too overly concerned with your own importance.
Huh?
Too overly concerned with your own importance.
Well, yeah, if that's the case. I mean, look, being proud of yourself is important. You need to have pride in yourself, and I think that's talking about. You bring this up even from last week, when last week was Pride here in Dallas, and we talk about a lot of people bring up that word pride, and they use it the wrong way. So the reason I bring that up today is because just you have to have some pride in yourself, but you have to watch. There's a fine line between being proud and being
Self-promoting.
right and self-promoting. There's a certain somebody that used to stay here that I used to, I would walk around and I do this, walk around next to him. That's all he did. He pat himself on the back. Every little thing he did, little thing, and I mean little things that he did because he didn't do much, he patted himself on the back about it. And I was like, dude, you picked up a Kleenex off the floor. Thank you. I mean, you would think that he just built the Taj Mahal. Self-promotion. It's not going to get you anywhere, guys. I mean, talk is cheap. We talk about that here all the time, right? Actions speak louder than words. Our other saying on our program, non digliamus, verbo, nec lingua, sed in opere. You must have got this right. I hopefully got it right. Non digliamus verbo, nec lingua, sed in opere et veritate, which in all essence means your actions speak louder than your words. Your words are nothing without some action behind it. And that's the truth. You can talk all you want. I could sit here and talk like blue in the face and tell you all kinds of wonderful things about me and how I'm a great this and a great that. And until I do something to prove how great I am, I'm nothing. Those are just words. It's just air. It's just vibrations in the atmosphere. I have to do something. You have to back up your words, or your words are nothing. And I don't think anybody here wants their words to be nothing. So moving on. I kind of digressed there. No one wants to be no one. So, yeah, please use the restroom.
No one wants to be no one.
It's just the phrase itself just kind of caught me. Because when you think about it, we all want to be somebody. I mean, there's even songs. If you want to be somebody, if you want to go somewhere, we have those things. There's these motivational speeches about being somebody. You grow up and you're going to be president someday. You're going to be, but here we are talking about humility and doing the work of God and doing it without expectation of reward or praise or award or that fine line there of but again the question comes down to, can the richest man on earth be the richest man in heaven? Does anybody have anything on that? I'd love to hear your ideas on that. Can the richest man on earth be the richest man in heaven?
You don't take anything with you when you go to.
You're right. So it's kind of irrelevant what he had here, isn't it? Maybe? What is the relevant factor then there?
It doesn't
At
matter.
least how much you've done.
Value things too much because
Okay.
it doesn't go with you.
Okay.
You're talking
But what about what makes him the richest man in heaven?
about without one.
His heart.
What gets us? What we're talking about? You're probably right. We probably all are equal in heaven, to a point. But the point I'm trying to make is, when I say the richest man in heaven, is the one who did the most, the one who gave the most of himself, the one who is selfless the most. Does that make sense? In other words, what we're talking about here are these measures of greatness. Greatness here on earth is something totally different than greatness in God's eyes, right? Greatness here on earth is, being a millionaire, being rich, being handsome or beautiful, having the right car, having the right boyfriend or girlfriend, having the right, 2.2 family and a dog and a cat and, the whole 9 yards, the perfect everything.
The Joneses.
But that's not what's perfect in God's eyes. That has nothing to do, really, with what's perfect in God's eyes and what we strive to be, which is, basically men and women for others, giving of ourselves, of our talents, back to those who need it, those who, need our assistance or our help or our, anything, just to lift them up.
God's going to see your heart.
Right. Well, your heart, we talk about your heart. What do you mean by your heart? Because your heart is...
Your purpose. The underlying reason for doing what you do.
That stuff coming out of your soul, those big emotions.
The richest man in heaven is any man that makes it to heaven.
Amen. Amen on that one. You got me on that one.
So,
see,
That's true.
you see why I keep him around?
But
He teaches me.
If it was a merit-based thing, anyone in heaven would be equal.
Say that again.
The richest man in heaven is any man that is in heaven.
Absolutely.
So, the poorest of poor who makes it to heaven is no more poor or richer than the richest man who is made it into.
You're right. The reason I brought it up that way is because of the way that Jesus had put it to his disciples of the last shall be first, and the first are they will be leaders. They're talking about that, and that's talking about after death, and you get your reward in heaven. So that's where I was going with that. And you're right on what you're saying. I was just kind of going off on the parable as to where we were going with that. And yes, in my opinion, the richest man on earth can very well be, if there was one, the richest man in heaven. He could be the one who deserves it the most. I guess you could say it that way. I hate to put it that way. It sounds so judgmental, but that's what the point I'm trying to get across to you is, look, the money here, the glitz here, the fame here, the popularity here. Yeah, you can have it. It's what you do with your life, though. It's what you do with that. It's how you still. I mean, just because you're the richest man on earth doesn't mean you have to be a jerk.
In my name, what did you do?
Right. And it doesn't mean you have to give away all your money either. That's not what it's asking. It's saying, but what did you do? What were your actions? Not just your words. What were your actions? And did you do it? Or did you just, as you said, pay somebody to do it? And that's the important part.
No, literally, they got
Oh, I believe you.
People who are in charge of giving away their fortunes.
I believe you. Well, yeah, there's a lot of philanthropists that are there that way, and that's not saying that they're necessarily their heart's not in the right place. You know, they may be doing other charity events and can't get there. I don't know. I can't judge them on that, but you know, I'm glad that they're there. I'm glad that they have people to do that, and
I bet those people are glad to be able to do that.
I'm sure they are. And in the end, you know, I guess justify the means to a point. Maybe we don't know. We don't know what's in their hearts. That's the hard part, to know what's in. It's really none of my business what's in their hearts, because I'm not the one judging them. We're talking about ourselves, though.
That's something between you and God.
Absolutely. You've got to, but you've got to be honest with yourself about what's in your heart too. I think a lot of people are not.
Is Robin Hood correct? Is he right in what he's doing?
Anybody have a thought on that one? Is it okay to steal from the rich and give to the poor? Anybody? It's a great question of sociology, if you will.
Or irony.
It is a bit of irony. Stealing from the rich. He's breaking the law. But then again, so did Jesus Christ. If we were to look at the enemies, at great enemies of nations, Jesus Christ would be one of the number one.
Terrorist.
A terrorist.
He'd be the capital. He'd be the head of Shadabadam.
I'll tell you, he was, you know, they were, if you look at it that way, George Washington would have been considered, you know, a enemy of peace and the right thing to do.
Right. Treason.
Treason.
Also told him, you know, give unto God what is God, and give unto Pilate what is Pilate. We are to be of this world, not in it.
Right.
Obey our local laws. Govern.
God doesn't have a side of Republican, Democrat, or you know, fighting with, you know, the people fighting over this or that, or the, you know, all the little wars we've had, or the big wars we've had. He doesn't really have a side in most of that. I mean, I think in some of it you have to think he does.
It's more us than everybody.
But yeah, he doesn't. The rain falls and the sun shines on everybody. God, I mean, that says it very clearly in the Old Testament. You know, he doesn't really. That's not really an issue for him. His issue is still what's in your heart. What are your intentions and what are you doing? I mean, it's all about taking a look at yourself, being honest with yourself. Because you know what? We can BS ourselves just like we can BS anybody else. I've seen it done time and time again. Start to believe your own crap. And then it's just it's a downhill fall from there, believe me. Be honest with yourself. Look into your own heart and your soul. And just ask yourself the question.
Sorry.
Am I living up to what would be considered great in God's eyes? Am I doing that? And if you're not, if you're falling asleep, if you're, you know, falling asleep in church is not so bad. I do it all the time.
If you're asking yourself that question,
If you're asking yourself that question, you probably need to keep going. And you know what? Here's what you do. If you don't know what to do next, if you don't know how to make yourself great, keep coming back to church. That's one thing. Keep listening. But pray. And we know when we talked about this, and this is something to get. You're the only one that was here last week, so I get to pick on you today. Our assignment last week for those who were here, I think that's probably why nobody showed up today, because they didn't want to talk about this assignment because they didn't do it, was to take 10 minutes out of every day, 10 whole minutes out of every day, those 6 days that we weren't here, and pray for 10 minutes. Half of it speaking, for 5 minutes, speaking maximum. That was it, 5 minutes. And Matthew, wake up, man. And the other half listening, kind of like he just was. He was off in a trance over there, just meditating and right into it. Did you get a chance to do that at all this week?
I did a few times in the bathroom.
Okay, I said get a nice quiet place. That's what I said. I mean, I don't care where it is, wherever you can get to be quiet and hear. How did it go for you?
It went well, I guess.
Okay, during that 5 minutes of silence, after you said your prayers or whatever, and your, you know, your part of the conversation with God, Were you able to relax enough, clear your mind enough, bring yourself centered enough to open yourself up and listen? And if so, would you mind sharing any of that experience with us? You don't have to. It's very personal. You don't have to. I'm just asking, was it any different? Was it any easier for you to...
Easier to stay positive that day and just...
Why do you think that is?
Because I cleared my mind of like any kind of negativity.
Okay. So the meditative part of it helped you to have a better day.
Yeah.
The way we begin a day can dictate how that day goes.
The way we end the night can also dictate how the next day goes.
Yeah.
Right? Always do that which is right. If you do that which is right, we know the difference between right and wrong. I tell you that all the time. You know the difference between right and wrong. If you don't, God gave you guilt. If you feel guilty, it's probably something you need to look at. It's a good indicator that something might be a little wrong here.
Right.
So, the big thing I was trying to push for is something that I talk about all the time, is about listening to God. Listening to God. The fact that, if you don't know, ask Him. He's not mute. He will speak to you. It's just, we have to know how to tune in to that radio. Because we're not listening. We've got blinders on. We've got too much going on around us. And that's part of, you say, being a part of this world, not of this world, right?
Yep.
Yeah. There's, the way we pray, and because it seems like it's a laundry list of requests that we...
And that's all we do. And then we get up and leave.
But in the Lord's Prayer, which is our model prayer, actually, what we want is for God's will to be done.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
God,
but we have to know what that will is.
Your will be done.
But we have to know what that will is sometimes.
Right. So we, give Him our concerns. We take Him our concerns, and our desires. But, let's end it with, if it's your will...
Then so be it. So be it.
We want to pray for the right thing, not for our thing.
Right. I think the important thing that I'm trying to get at is, look, prayer is important. You need to do it. You need to do it, and because it helps you stay on your path. And that's what we're talking about here all the time, is staying on your path.
Yeah.
And if you lose your connection with God, you're not going to be on your path. I guarantee that. You've got to stay connected. And the best way to stay connected is to talk, have a conversation, and listen. That's all there is to it. It's just like you're talking, just like we talk right now. All of us, well, most of us, well, Baylor and I, talk. It's just like that. You just have to listen. But you have to be willing to listen. That's the hard part. Like I say, how many people get on their knees, they say, I want this, I want that, praise this, praise that, bless this person, bless that person, can you give me $1 million? And then they get up and walk away. Right? And God's standing there going, excuse me, I have something to say to you. And you didn't hear a word He said. You just walked on back. You just left on. Okay, well, maybe I'll get what I wanted. And then you'll bitch the next day that you didn't get what you wanted because, God was trying to tell you how to get that $1 million, and you just go down this path and make a right, but you wouldn't look to left. I'm not saying that God's going to give you $1 million.
But
if you deserve it, maybe. If you don't deserve it, maybe. It's not really what matters, is it? So, prayer is important. Measure of greatness. Think about that next time you look in the mirror. Look at yourself in the eyes. Look yourself in the eyes. Eyes are the windows to the what?
Soul.
Absolutely. Let's end this in prayer, guys. This is a good one. I think that y'all really need to think about this one a little more on your own. Maybe look yourself in the eyes when you get a chance. Look in the mirror. Look yourself in the eyes and ask yourself, are you doing what God would consider to be great? Father in heaven, thank you for the opportunity to meet here today with all of our friends and our congregants. Even the ones who were late, we're grateful that they were able to make it and the effort they made to get here. Lord, help us to understand what your will is for us. Help us to live up to your measure of greatness, and help us to hear what you have in store for us, what your idea is for us, what your path is for us. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys. I'll see you all next week. 11 o'clock next Sunday.
Go Steve.
Sorry, 3 o'clock.